I'm not sure what to title this video yet. I was reading in the Cryon text. Cryon said that they receive their instructions, guidance, orders from the Brotherhood. And so, out of curiosity, I picked up the Urantia book and began looking for the Brotherhood. And I did find a section on the spirit of the Brotherhood and on brotherhood in general. And there's a lot of that speak in the Urantia book. The subject of the Brotherhood led me down a path which ended at atonement, and that the new seraphic, these are like angelic types that help to influence evolution on planets. They do come and help us to understand what was conceived as the atonement and to know that anew, or in a more real understanding of actually divine attunement. Okay. Where to begin with this? I was shown, I'm going to speak about vampires for a minute. We all know what a vampire is in the lore. We have lots of movies and books and all kinds of things based on vampires. Well, let's take a minute and look at a vampire. So with a vampire, you have these beings who actually drink the blood of humans, right? And they live a lot longer, and they are stronger and more powerful. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask for a moment that you try to understand if such a being truly existed. If there were such beings as vampires, and I'm even being shown the Highlander. If you guys remember the Highlander, and these were these characters who lived a really long time and couldn't die unless they cut each other's heads off. So they lived a really long time, and they had to keep creating new identities for themselves because they didn't age and die. And so they were able to accumulate a lot of wealth and a lot of power because they had great influence and through knowledge and experience, as well as financial assets. Is it so hard to conceive that our planet Earth may very well have been controlled by certain types of beings who had gained massive amounts of financial assets, who lived much longer than we do, for many different reasons, because they have access to advanced technologies that they refuse to allow the rest of us to have, because they make money off of our illnesses through the pharmaceutical industry, etc., etc. If we were all well and had these med beds and the like technologies available to us, they wouldn't have been able to amass the great financial assets that they had. Okay. So our world has been, our planet has been formulated in error. There was okay, and I have to mention that now, what we call the fall of Adam, right? I'm not sure. Let me see how the book classifies that. The Adamic miscarriage. So anyway, what happened there with the fall of Adam. And so because of the things that occurred there with the Lucifer rebellion, etc., and then consequently the fall of Adam. From that, this planet was formulated on a different it was set up or structured in its governance, control mechanisms, in a way that was really not beneficial to the multitude of us. Okay, again, you have the 1% and 2% at the top, and the trickle down effect, and the ones at the bottom have the least amount, and they're the ones that sometimes work the hardest. This is not, as far as worlds are created and established, this is not the way worlds are intended to operate. But that is how this one has operated because of complications. I don't even want to say dissensions, but it is. It was a dissension from the normal platform of operation. So anyway, my point is that the planet has been operating under the influence and control of the few who have much, instead of equality to all. You could break this down into many different concepts, but let's just say that the spirit of brotherhood has been corrupted continuously to allow this platform of this platform of mechanics to persist in its operation. If we had been able to reach this spirit of brotherhood and appreciation and love for our brothers as Christ taught, the system would have broken down earlier. I mean, at least that's the idea, because it must fail once we appreciate each other. Because once we appreciate each other, we want what's best for each other, and then those few at the top of the pyramid, they would lose their hold on everything, because we would change everything underneath them, and they would fall. So based on the principle of vampirism, let's go back to that. So you have these creatures that drink blood, etc. And this is how they maintain, and I'm talking about vampires in lore. This is how they stay alive, is they drink our blood. Okay. Well, let's say that, because all things are energy and all things are energy, let's say that there is great energy in the form of blood. We can even substitute blood for energy, okay? So let's say that these 1-2% at the top of the pyramid, maybe even above them yet, actually do maintain their livelihood off of our energy and draining it or harvesting our energy. Now, whether you want to see it in the form of bloodletting or however you want to see it, then we look at the rituals of religions where animal sacrifice or even human sacrifice was deemed righteous. Can you see the connection? The reason I bring this up is because the atonement, when Christians talk about the atonement, and that was the crucifixion of Christ, the idea is that there must have been a sacrifice made to gift the rest of us with salvation. Where might this concept have come from? Who actually gets salvation by draining the blood or the energy from humans? This concept, if you stand back and look at it, is an intense control mechanism that we have been cultured into believing is normal and acceptable, because that is how this whole planet has operated. It is not. as far as spirit is concerned, this is not normal. This is not acceptable. This would never be a practice that would be necessary in spirit. Those were control mechanisms for man. Now, I'm not going to tell you how to interpret that when it comes to your biblical readings or teachings. I'm going to allow, at least for this time, for you to do that inner work yourself. But what I will say about the atonement is the whole message of Christ was one of brotherhood, one of brotherly love, one of love. That is the message of divine attunement. It is the message of coming into resonance with divine love. If we all are in resonance with divine love, there is brotherhood across this planet, the spirit of brotherhood. There is no warring, there is no struggle, strife, pestilence. We all come together cooperatively and work together. And this could not happen. It would not be allowed under the control mechanisms, because they would not be able to maintain control if it occurred. If we all came into attunement with divine love, those at the top of the pyramid who have been controlling and manipulating the works for thousands of years would have fallen. They are falling, but it would have happened sooner. So it was impressed upon me that I needed to speak of this today, because atonement, it has been referred to as at-one-ment, which actually is in-tunement, or in attunement with divine love, in attunement with spirit, to resonate and to be in harmony with that which is divine. When we are in harmony with the divine or divine love, we know that draining the life force from anything benefits who? Who benefits from draining the life force out of an animal or humans? If we consume the meat of that animal, we benefit, right? That's true, at least for our bodies. If that animal is raised with a very loving environment, that animal becomes that loving essence. And when we take that into ourselves, if the animal was raised in that environment, we are actually taking that love into ourselves. If we consume meat or anything that was raised in an environment that was toxic, we are taking that toxic energy into ourselves, because all things are energy. And so when you drain the blood or the life from something, but here's the funny thing, God is life. God is life. So in this, we also see a worship of death, okay? The act of sacrifice in general, or animal sacrifice, or just sacrifice of yourself even. When you're going against what it is that feels right for you or feels good for you, that is sacrifice. These things are worshiping death. That is not of God. I know it's very difficult to hear this, but it is anything. We have been so trained that these things are normal and righteous, and there's the point. As it was impressed upon me, it has been impressed upon me multiple ways, multiple times, that in order for these control mechanisms to have been successful this long, they had to pervert the human consciousness to believing that these things were normal and acceptable and beneficial. Because if they didn't pervert our ideas and our thoughts and our beliefs, we never would have gone along with it. They could not have continued to have power over us. And that is their survival. You Christians, when it speaks of Satan or Lucifer and the effect that they have on man, does this not sound like that? Doesn't this really embody exactly that? How do you tear a divine child of God away from God, but to teach them that God is something that is not divine, so that they hearken to something that is not God? You teach them what God is. It's harder to maintain the connection with what God really is and who God is and your source. If I believe, if I believe that I am a seed from a mustard plant, but I'm really a seed from a watermelon plant, and I keep hearkening to the mustard plant, I never really find my home. I'm always off balance. But then there are some who realize that they don't feel so good hanging out with the mustard plant for whatever reason, and they walk away and go to the watermelon patch, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, this is what it is. And then they begin to see everything that had made them think otherwise. So these concepts, if you're not already seeing it, you will. It must come to light because the truth must come to light. Christ was the embodiment of truth. That is why he taught brotherly love. He taught to love your neighbors even as he loves us, because then that's one step above, that's fatherly love. And if we look at the real message of Christ, all these other things fall away. And you cannot merge them because the intentions were completely different. Okay? The religious practices of old were from the Lucifer rebellion. Plain and simple. The Lucifer rebellion set this planet on an alternate type of path. Not bad, not good. It's really interesting when you hear these other beings speak of it, because they don't have that concept of bad or good. They're above that, beyond that. And so they say, this is how it happened. Like, this is what happened. Not with no judgment over bad or good, or, but they just say, this is what happened. And if we look at it, we can say, wow. And in this book, the Urantia book, it speaks of the earlier religions and how, they went from multiple gods to, and it was really a challenge to get them down to one God, to the one God belief structure. And it kind of like, how do I want to say, kind of like teeter-tottered back and forth between. And then even under that, so there are so many spiritual entities of spirit. You can put whatever label on them you want. If you want to label them angels, there are those, seraphim. But there are also others like Cryon, right? That are energetic and have to do with polarities that never come into a body or form. And so it is understandable why earlier religions had many gods, because they understood that, oh, well, there's a being who is in charge of this aspect of life and reality. There's a being who's in charge of that aspect of the workings of the universe. And so it's easy to understand how they would have many different gods. But the truth of the matter is, there is one source. And there are all these other beings that hold titles and positions within the workings of our universes, including us. And so, but when this book speaks of the histories of these religions and how it came to be on our planet, it was important for us to get to the understanding of there being one infinite creator so that Christ could come. And it's really just the process. It's the process. Because on this planet, in these incarnations, we have these imprints that block information, that don't allow us to know the wholeness of things. Because if we knew the wholeness of things, we could not learn from this experience. And Cryon says we are in lesson here. We are in lesson here. We are in lesson to become creators ourselves. And we are creators. Even on this planet, we create and manifest all the time. But we are in lesson, and this is just me, my understanding. We are in lesson to become creators of our own worlds. And we have to go through the trenches to get to really understand the depth of what it is to be in material form before we can create that elsewhere. How would we know what our children will go through unless we have already gone through it? I know this is huge, and it's like many minds will not be able to comprehend this, and that's okay. Take what you can today, take what resonates with you, and do whatever you want with the rest. It doesn't matter. But I was impressed to talk about the atonement today, and that the atonement is in attunement with divine love. And that was the message that Christ brought in the message of love. It doesn't have anything to do with draining of blood or the blood, except that that is a symbol of life, right? Blood is a symbol of life, at least when you're in a body. And when Christ gave his life, it was not unto death. Christ's life was his willingness and motivation to love us by teaching us the truth. His crucifixion was only necessary in the minds of men. And I guess in a way it served him to be gone quicker too, that he could continue on doing what he needed to do, and not be, how do I want to say that? That's not, and not be completely encumbered or limited by being in a body all the time. Because the body that he created, he did create a new body. The body that he created was the one that they speak of in the resurrection. It is my understanding that after the resurrection, he spent a lot of time in spirit, more so than in physicality. So I think that the crucifixion served him in that way, that it was like, okay, let's just be done with this part and I can go do the next thing. So I can't say I need to get rid of my feelings, my negative feelings around the crucifixion, because it happened the way it happened for a reason. Even though it pains me, it pains me. And I think it pains me because the act of his crucifixion has been used to justify and reinforce the hateful, negative ideas in the mind of men. That his crucifixion somehow was manipulated to to discredit or dispower his message of brotherly love, which is where our focus really should be. But for so many, the focus is on killing and justification of killing, justification of, and you know what I say when people disbelieve the things that seem to be unbelievable, that I say, we live in a world where Christ was crucified. And if that took place, how can you absolutely discredit anything? Because to me, that is absolutely ridiculous that we can justify the crucifixion of Christ. It just boggles my mind. So everything else that I hear that might seem really outlandish isn't, because the thing that I think is the most outlandish has been accepted by so many. So anyway, that is my thing for today. I hope that hits whatever chord it's meant to. In peace and love, may you be blessed.